Hello and welcome to Breaking Down, the series where we take an in-depth look at a Fire Emblem unit from a gameplay perspective. Before we start, I would like to thank the people who support me in making content like this by backing the channel on Patreon, where for just £1 a month you can get access to a bunch of benefits, including voting on the release order for this series. For more info, check the link in the description. Today, we will be looking at the Black Eagles Songstress, Dorothea. Whilst this series is not focused around plot, there is always a chance for spoilers, and certain elements of the game and its structure and story will inevitably be mentioned. So if that is a concern for you, feel free to give it a miss. Also, where relevant, this is considering the maddening difficulty on a regular new game file with no exploits or excessive grinding. Dorothea is a member of the Black Eagles, so if they are your initial choice, she will be available from Chapter 1 and able to be used for the entire game. If you opt for one of the other routes, she will need to be recruited. As is the case with most students, if you get her support rank to a B with Byleth, she can ask to join your house on any day following this. Alternatively, you can meet her recruit requirements, which lie in Charm and Authority, with the specifics depending on Byleth's support rank with her. Both of these are pretty favourable areas for Byleth, but the base ranks are also quite high. That being said, hitting 10 Charm and D+ Authority can be done very early, which are the requirements for a B rank support. While she can auto-join at this point, being able to guarantee it is nice, and on the whole you can usually pick her up pretty early through the said requirements, if you wanted to make use of her in the Blue Lions or Golden Deer. Dorothea's personal ability is Songstress, which restores 10% of an ally's max HP if they start their turn adjacent to Dorothea. This is a perfectly fine personal as long as you remember it happens and don't accidentally heal units who need to be low health. Whilst the heal is small, it's easily triggered, and can be useful for topping up units who don't want big heals, such as those aforementioned low health units, or somebody like Ferdinand who likes to be at full HP and may only be missing a hit point or two. Nothing incredible, but it has its uses for sure. Dorothea does not have a crest. This means that she doesn't get any benefits that one may provide, and will also take 10 damage when she participates in combat with a relic weapon or equipment equipped. This isn't the biggest deal, the crests tend not to be too helpful, and the damage taken from the relics is essentially negligible. It will very rarely play an impact, and not really put you off of using any of these that can be beneficial to make use of. On the whole, it just doesn't make a massive impact to be missing this. Moving on to Dorothea's skill spread, it's incredibly small, with only 2 boons in Swords and Reason, 3 Banes in Faith, Riding and Flying, with the Bane in Faith also holding a budding talent. There isn't really a whole lot going on with this, but this small spread can actually be very impactful. The first thing to note is that Dorothea is primarily a magic-based character, so having modifiers in both Reason and Faith will hold a lot of relevance for a lot of her builds. In conjunction with this, her spell list is going to be extremely relevant here, and in her Reason list she makes use of Black Magic, which can see benefits from a lot of abilities that are held within classes. At base, she gets Thunder, which has a few problems, such as shaky accuracy compared to Wind or Fire, and very limited casts when contending with the fact that its base of 8 is halved by Commoner, giving her only 4 spellcasts with not that great a chance of landing those hits, which can cause problems and inconsistencies in getting out of those early levels. At the C rank, Dorothea gets Thorin, a very useful 1 to 3 range tool which can make it much easier and safer for her to output damage. Getting a 3 range option, especially at the C rank, is never going to be a bad thing and will always have many good contributions. At B Reason, Dorothea gets Sagate, which doesn't hit particularly hard, but it is pretty accurate and reliable for when you need it, although for the time when you get this, it definitely isn't anything particularly special. When she hits the A rank, Dorothea gets Meteor, a spell with a huge range of 10, however it is also on the weaker side with just 10 might. It does have an area of effect, also damaging enemies who are adjacent to the target, which can be nice. Whilst it can always find use due to its range, it can definitely lack kill power, mostly just being used for setting up kills or baiting over enemy squads who you want to disrupt the positioning of. The massive range is also useful for linked attacks, particularly in her native house where she has a lot of supports. It certainly isn't bad, but it does have its drawbacks. Agnea's Arrow at A+ Reason is Dorothea's hardest hitting spell with 16 might, giving her a much needed kill tool. Whilst it has accuracy issues, by the time you get this you should have had plenty of opportunities to pick up some accuracy enhancements to make up for this. The spell comes very late due to its high rank, and also has very limited casts with just 2 per map by default. However, it does play an important role in her spell list of being something with some real damage. Over in the Faith side of Dorothea's spell list, she of course gets Heal and Nosferatu, which are available to every unit, and on top of this she only gets 1 more spell, at the C rank. This spell is Physic, a long-range healing option which can be useful throughout the game. This is never a bad thing to get. Being able to top up allies from a distance is always nice, and it gives Dorothea the option to pick up a bit of extra experience on turns where she has nothing else to do, thanks to its huge range. On the whole, Dorothea's spell list is fine. The biggest problem she has is that the majority of her spells only do damage, but none of them actually do that much damage. Even Agnia's arrow can lack some firepower, especially on top of Dorothea's stats, which we will go into more later. Still, Thorin has some nice range flexibility, along with Meteor, and Physic is always welcome, so it isn't awful, just lacking a headline spell or any real utility outside of healing. Of course, Dorothea's Faith does not start as a boon, but as a bane, with a budding talent. When this is mastered by tutoring her in the area 12 times, this will then become a boon, as well as unlocking the ability White Magic Avoid plus 20. The ability here is basically pointless. Due to her limited spell list, you would either have to be using Nosferatu or equipped on one of the healing spells. Honestly, I would be surprised if this ever finds a benefit and will most likely go unused. That being said, the newfound boon can be useful for some class certs and easier access to Physic, so it can still be worth picking up. Whilst I said earlier that Dorothea's spell list can lack damage, she does have one tool elsewhere in her kit that can help bring this to the table, and that is Hexblade, which is acquired at C+ swords. Despite using swords, this is a magic attack, meaning it is fueled by the user's magic attack and hits on the enemy's resistance. It also adds a very sizable 7 might to this, further amping up the damage, as well as 10 hit, helping its reliability on an already quite accurate weapon type. Being able to use the might of a weapon, even if it is a sword which is typically lower damage, while still hitting on the usually lower tanking stat, lets her output significantly more damage and massively amps up Dorothea's kill potential, especially for something that can be gotten pretty early. The sword boon can also help for some class qualifications that she may wish to make use of, as well as helping to pick up some prowess skills to help these hits land. All in all, this is just a really helpful boon to have that helps out in a lot of ways. The two movement skill banes in riding and flying can be harmful for some class qualifications, making it require extra investment to reach these. Some of these classes can be quite desirable during the later stages of the game, so being held back from these can be a little annoying. That being said, Dorothea can still reach these classes without too much bother, so whilst frustrating, these aren't necessarily problematic. She would rather not have these banes, but they also aren't the biggest deals in the world either. Whilst it doesn't contain a modifier, Dorothea's authority is also very important, particularly for her early game. This is because of an ability contained at the D rank, Rally Charm. When Dorothea uses this, she provides an adjacent ally with a boost of 8 charm for one turn, which can be a massive swing of up to 40 gambit hit, massively boosting the unit's reliability early on. This definitely loses some impact later in the game, but at the time you can access it, Rally Charm is massively beneficial and can be a huge bailout in some tricky situations. Statistically, Dorothea's base 11 magic is perfectly fine, in line with most other magically oriented units. However, her growth of 40% is a little below what could usually be expected here. Ultimately, this will only really cost 1 to 2 points of magic every 10 levels on average, so whilst it could add up over time, it won't have too much of an impact until then. Her other strong starting stat is her charm of 8, letting her use gambits effectively from the get-go. This also lets her certify into Dancer if she gains just 1 point more, which can be very easily done. Dorothea's other stats aren't particularly noteworthy. She's frail defensively, other than her resistance, which can let her take magical attacks quite comfortably. Her speed won't let her double too much outside of the extremely slow enemies, such as armoured units, although it might be enough to stop some middling speed enemies from doubling her. 5 base strength offsets 1 point of weapon weight from base, which is better than nothing, but not going to be massively impactful. The last thing to note about Dorothea is that she has a might support with Manuela. Whilst this isn't the most important thing ever, it is worth noting that they both have siege tomes, so once you have these on each character, taking advantage of these might supports becomes very easy as they can give the bonuses to each other from 10 tiles away simply by equipping the spell. From a gameplay perspective, Dorothea will always receive a lot of attention as a dancer, both for lore and gameplay reasons. However, I'm going to hold off on talking about that until the end, and go into her as a standard unit first. I don't think it's worth bringing Dorothea along for Chapter 1. She only has Forecast of Thunder and overall just doesn't bring too much to the table, although she does appreciate the small amount of XP she can get if you did choose to bring her along. She does get the full morale boost from the Chapter 1 shared meal though, so it can be worth taking advantage of this to be able to invest into her appropriately for Chapter 2. By far her best early investment is Authority. This is to get her rally ability, Rally Charm, which can turn your early gambits from being highly uncertain gambles into near guaranteed hits. Given how limited these can be, especially early on, making them as reliable as possible is a huge asset that makes your path through the first couple of chapters significantly easier. Whilst Dorothea doesn't get any XP for rallying, her limited spellcasts mean that she will have very limited valuable contributions outside of this anyway, so she isn't losing out on a whole lot. Dorothea does want to push for level 5 as soon as possible, if only to get out of the commoner struggle that mages face, with her spellcasts being halved. This means that if the opportunity does present itself to grant her a kill, it's probably worth taking on her, especially if you can do it with a physical weapon or even just some safe chip with a training bow or sword. Once Dorothea does hit level 5, Monk is of course the best option, thanks to it providing access to her spell list as well as Magic +2 when mastered. After Rally Charm, Dorothea's next best investment can be very much down to what your team needs at the time. The most obvious choice would be to invest in her Reason and pick up Thorin, giving her some solid 1 to 3 range damage, more spellcast just from having an additional spell, and also a higher damage option. On top of this, it makes it easier for her to provide support via linked attacks, mainly though the added range just gives her more opportunities to contribute to the action, which is greatly appreciated. Another strong option is to expand on her utility and invest into her Faith, to pick up Heal, Nosferatu, and Physic. This keeps her topped up on utility, allowing her to cast much more frequently and thus gain EXP for doing so. If she falls behind in levels, this can be a strong option, as it gives her a solid chance to gain some EXP each turn. Even if the healing isn't necessary, there's usually some you can throw out just for some straight experience to help her catch back up. Of course, the healing brings its own inherent benefits too. The third choice here is to go for Hexblade from her sword rank. Whilst this is a one-range attack and she will still have low move at this point in time, it will be by far her hardest hitting option at this point in the game, and for the future as well. It will hit like a truck even with the early weaponry, but as the game progresses and you get access to stronger or more specialised swords, it will continue to scale up. I think ideally you want to go Thorin, then Hexblade, and then the Faith spells here, but moving up the Faith spells if Dorothea starts to fall behind or you feel you need the healing more than the damage is absolutely fine. Catering the order to your current needs is more important than going for a general best path here. Either way, you will want to pick up all of these, although on the way you should start looking towards your intermediate class. The obvious choice here is Mage, and I do think it's the correct one. The additional 6 magic when initiating combat that is granted by Fiendish Blow upon mastering the class is a much needed supplement to her damage, and whilst in the class itself, she gains an additional point of magic and retains spell list usage. The Fire spell which the class grants is also very useful, being more accurate and having more cast than Thunder, and it is also very light, weighing her down less, making it an excellent option for chipping or finishing off weakened enemies. Another option for classing at this point in time can be Thief. You don't actually want to use this class, but just for certifying into it, it will bump Dorothea's speed and dexterity up to 11 apiece permanently. It requires Sea Swords to guarantee the certification, but if you already have this from grabbing Hexblade, then if she is below these stat marks, there is basically no reason not to bump them up a touch, providing you can spare the intermediate seal. Continue picking up the earlier mentioned skills, but now you will also want to look towards an accuracy ability. You have 2 options here, Hit +20 from Archer and Uncanny Blow from Valkyrie. The latter seems like the far better option, but I do think there is merit to both, depending on your situation. In Hit +20's favour, the main benefit is that it can be accessed much earlier, at an intermediate level rather than an advanced one. This means that after mastering Mage, you can jump straight into the class and work your way towards this. Whilst Dorothea doesn't have a boon in bows, she doesn't have a bane either, and you can gamble the certification with just a D+ rank, so the investment here is actually quite small. Not only can you access the class earlier and for lower investment, it also requires less to master too, as the intermediate classes require only 100 class EXP versus the 150 of an advanced class like Valkyrie. 100 class EXP is potentially only 25 actions with a knowledge gem and the boost from the Saint statue. The big limitation on this class are the actions Dorothea can actually take whilst in it. Her combat will likely just be limited to the use of the magic combat art Hexblade and making use of a Levin sword. The latter can keep being a 1 to 3 range option if you upgrade it via forging, and is generally a solid tool anyway, so it's not like she's lacking on the offensive front. The big thing here is that she loses out on her spell list, particularly her healing spells, and whilst I don't think this is a massive loss on the battlefield, it can cost Dorothea a lot of potential actions which speed up the class mastery. Valkyrie is also a really solid advanced class for her to be in anyway, so going into it at this stage is never a bad choice. It allows Dorothea to retain access to her spell list, as well as providing a boost of 4 magic to amp up her damage, and an additional range to her black magic spells, taking Thorin up to 4 and her others up to 3, making it very flexible in combat. She can of course still make use of her swords here too, as well as her healing spells. The class also has 6 move and canto, which when combined with the aforementioned range, allow her to get hits in on a lot of enemies and then dip out afterwards, remaining very safe. The combination of mobility, range, and healing access all but guarantees she will be taking an action every turn, and despite requiring 150 class EXP to master, this can be gotten through very quickly, particularly when using the boost from the Saint statue and the Knowledge Gem, taking this down to 38 actions. Valkyrie requires B Reason and B Riding to class into, however it is probably ideal to gamble the Riding check, due to Dorothea's Bane in the area. If you did want to go down this path, just make sure you start the riding investment with enough time to reach it by level 20. Uncanny Blow also has some notable differences itself to hit plus 20. The former only works on the player phase, not providing anything on the enemy phase, although this is unlikely to make much of a difference to Dorothea, since she doesn't have much going for her as an enemy phase unit. Uncanny Blow is also a boost of 30 hit, rather than hit plus 20, providing, 20. In general, this will usually swing in the favour of the higher accuracy from the Valkyrie skill. I personally prefer the Valkyrie option overall here too, and will just ride it out in Mage until hitting level 20, but Archer does have upsides to it and it is worth considering, especially because there is another option when you reach your advanced classes, that being Dark Flyer. This provides 7 move, 1 more than Valkyrie, as well as flight, whilst retaining Canto, giving the class much more movement flexibility, albeit at the cost of Valkyrie's range boosts. Dark Flyer also loses the 4 magic bonus of Valkyrie, but does provide Black Tome Fair, boosting the damage of her spells by 5. However, whilst it is a small advantage for the spells, you don't gain any extra damage on Hexblade or Levin sword attacks. Dark Flyer requires C Flying and B plus Reason to certify, and similarly to Valkyrie, it's easiest to meet the Reason rank and gamble the Flying rank due to the Bane in this area. You can also go for Valkyrie into Dark Flyer, providing you are happy to spend the investment to certify into both, which can be quite costly, but it all depends on what suits your team better. It is also worth noting that this costs 2 Abyss Seals, which can be quite limited if you aren't using the Pagan Altar. After all that discussion about advanced classes and hit skills, it's worth returning to Dorothea's investment choices for things other than classing. Reason obviously benefits from continued investment, especially to reach Meteor. Whilst it can be lackluster in terms of damage, there will inevitably be turns where throwing it out for some chip or to aggro a group of enemies is your best option, so it is worth picking up. Furthermore, its massive range makes it exceptionally easy for Dorothea to provide linked attacks. Of course, you can also get Agnia's Arrow at A plus Reason later down the line, for her punchiest spell and her strongest tool other than Hexblade, which can be valuable since it can hit pretty hard while still being ranged. Swords can be another good source of investment to continue gaining ranks of sword prowess, aiding Hexblade and Levin sword hits. You can also eventually pick up Axebreaker, giving these attacks added bonuses against axe-wielding foes, of which the game has many. Authority is also another solid investment, since it allows Dorothea to use the best battalions available to her and amp up her damage and hit rates to the very best they can be, something that can be much appreciated if you want her to truly shine. Something else that can be worth considering is having Dorothea make use of one of the range boosting staffs, Thyrsus or Caduceus, to allow her spells to cause carnage from even greater distances. Thyrsus boosts range by 2, but as Dorothea does not have a crest, she will take damage every time she uses it, whereas she will not face this deficit with Caduceus, however its range boost is only 1. The health loss isn't that big of a deal though, and the bigger issue Dorothea will face is that your party's harder hitting mages with harder hitting spells stake a much better claim to the valuable tools. Before we move too far off of the topic, it's worth briefly mentioning Warlock as an advanced class option. Because of it having both Black Tome Fair and a +3 magic modifier, it provides the biggest damage boost to Dorothea's spells. It also brings black magic uses ×2, something which can particularly be useful for Meteor and Agnia's Arrow, but also very helpful for spells like Thorin. The big issue the class faces is its highly limited 4 move, which can make maneuverability very difficult, especially with a lack of Canto or Flight. Warlock, Valkyrie, and Darkflyer are all perfectly valid endgame classes for Dorothea, but you do have a couple more options that you can consider in the Master Stage past level 30. The first of these is Gremory, which requires a Reason and a Faith to guarantee the qualification, but you can gamble this earlier if you prefer. This provides double uses of both her Reason and Faith spells, as well as a +5 magic modifier, amping up any of her spells as well as her magical sword-based attacks. Once again, the big issue is mobility, although it has 5 move rather than 4, which is an improvement. This class can be really solid from a damage perspective, but Gremory tends to favour units the most when they have very high priority spells that you desperately want more uses of, and whilst it can benefit things like Meteor, I don't think the trade-off is worth the mobility or damage that other classes can provide. Speaking of damage, this brings us on to the class which provides Dorothea's highest damage potential, Mortal Savant. Thanks to the class's Swordfare, which provides 5 damage to all of her sword-based attacks, as well as its +2 magic modifier, it amps up Hexblade more than any other class, and as this is her most powerful tool, it means that Dorothea can hit harder with a single attack in this class than any other. This makes it very valuable. It also brings Black Tonefare, so her spells are amped up significantly too, only 1 point of damage behind Warlock, her strongest option in this regard. Mortal Savant lacks some of the mobility modifiers, things like Canto and Flight, however with 6 move, its mobility isn't bad. Its qualifications require A Swords and B+ Reason, which isn't too hard to reach considering these are boon areas and both will experience passive growth from use. Plus, investing in both of these areas accesses the better prowess skills anyway, so there are other merits and advantages to investing here. All of these classes have their advantages, and there is no one which is outright the best, so certifying for multiple and switching between them based on the map you're facing can be very advantageous. Because Dorothea can lack a bit of firepower, due to having subpar magic growth and a lack of punching her spells, she can often be playing it very close to kill thresholds, so the option to jump into something like Mortal Savant or Warlock can allow her to bring down foes that she otherwise would not be able to. In other situations, the mobility of Darkflyer or the range of Valkyrie may be preferred. Dorothea will struggle to shine in any single area, but she can have a lot of flexibility which can let her stand out if you take advantage of it. After any masterclass, the only real investment left for Dorothea is to continue into Reason and Swords to pick up remaining prowess skills, such as Axebreaker and Black Magic Range +1. There is also Black Tonefare or Swordfare from the S+ ranks, however it is highly unlikely that this point will be reached in standard play, just because of the sheer volume of investment it requires. Authority also wants continued investment until the A rank, just to let her use the best battalions. That about wraps up a standard use Dorothea, but I did mention we would touch back onto Dancer earlier. Dorothea holds a notable relevance as a dancer thanks to her access to Meteor. Because she never actually wants to cast the spell, she just wants to dance every turn, you can keep Meteor equipped to provide a linked attack bonus to anybody within a 10-tile radius. This is particularly relevant in-house where a lot of her allies will have supports with Dorothea. It is also very easy to ensure she wins the White Heron Cup. She starts with 8 Charm, and it is very easy to get a perfect tea time with her, as one of her favourite teas, the Sweet Apple Blend, is given to you for completing the quest that gives you the tea set. Her birthday also falls in the time period between gaining access to tea parties and the White Heron Cup, so you can gain a charm point here. Then you get 5 for the dancing training, and it guarantees her a passing grade at 14 charm. There is a little more I could go into here, but it's mostly very straightforward. I have a full video coming regarding Fire Emblem Three Houses dancers later this month, and I think that most of that talk would make better sense there than here. But it is worth mentioning that Dorothea is one of your strongest dancer choices, particularly in the Black Eagles house, where she shares a support with a lot of the cast, including powerful player phase units like Edelgard, Bernadetta, and Ferdinand. I think we can bring this one to a close here. I hope this helps you to get the most out of Dorothea. If you would like to discuss this video, the channel, or Fire Emblem in general, consider joining the Discord. Once again, I would like to thank the people who back the channel on Patreon and support me in making content like this and everything else on the channel. It means a lot and it's greatly appreciated. There's a link in the description with all of the information and benefits you get for backing, which can be done from just £1 a month. Thank you all for watching, have a great day.